Hi everyone, welcome back to Creative Coloring with Erum. Today I'm sharing a watercolor project using the Deep Muse Watercolor Compact. This session is a bit more detailed than our last one, but it's perfect for practicing fine strokes and building soft layered color. Feel free to paint along and take your time enjoying the process. I will use the Build-A-Garden Fanciful Pansies today and the hot press watercolor cardstock cut into 4 by 5.5 inches. The watercolor compact that I will use today is called Deep Muse and has muted tones, which you can see here. I will activate the pigment with water and set it aside. I will use the Stampwheel to stamp the Fanciful Pansies image in Obsidian Pigment Ink onto the watercolor panel. I'll use the acetate sheet to help position the image just right, then stamp it. I might need to stamp a few times to get a clear impression, especially since there's a bit of texture on the cardstock. At this point, you can choose whether to go with an outline or a no-line image, whatever suits your style. Since I don't want to stay here all night, we'll go with Obsidian. But feel free to pick any light colored ink or even permanent mist gray ink if you prefer the no-line look. It's all about what makes you happy and gets you excited for your project. I'll start by using the fine watercolor brushes and begin with a size 4 brush to gently apply water. I like to switch between brushes depending on what I pick up. For those tiny details, I'll switch to the 3x0 brush to get just the right touch. I'll apply just enough water to make it glisten beautifully without making it too runny. I won't go all the way to the center of the flower with the water, but I'll gently drag my brush up to that point so that it's not completely dry. Next, I'll gently start applying the raspberry rose to the tips of the petals and gradually bring it inward. I use 2 brushes, one for applying the pigment and the other for water. The water brush helps me soften the pigment, creating a lovely, seamless look. I will bring in more concentrated pigment to make the petal tips darker, and then again, soften the pigment slightly by bringing it inwards. I will repeat this for all the petals. I will now let the petal tips dry while I add concentrated color to the flower center. Using golden ochre, I will paint a dome-like shape onto the flower center. I will not soften this at the moment. I will come back to it later. If the adjacent petals are wet, you can skip and paint. I'm leaving a hairline's width of space between them so that the paint doesn't run into the other petal. Now, if you're happy with the depth of raspberry rose on the petal tips, use lilac burgundy and the 3x0 brush to start applying fine flicks from the tips of the petals inward towards the flower center. Make sure the panel is positioned so that when you apply the flicks, you apply them towards yourself. In this way, they appear more delicate and you have better control over their curve. Also be mindful of how you apply the fine strokes. Don't just paint them straight. Try to give them a slight curve, matching the petal's curvature and following its shape. I picked up more pigment this time, so I will apply this to the extreme edge and then carefully pull it out to make the stroke more visible and darker. I really like the soft transition and gentle blush of color on the top petal. It adds such a lovely depth. To achieve this, I suggest using a damp brush with diluted raspberry rose or even the color already on the petal, since the water will help pull the pigment beautifully. This might soften some of the details, especially the harsher lines or edges, just like we usually do to create a more harmonious look. But that's perfectly fine because I can always layer in darker shades later if I want more contrast. Oh, and notice how I'm leaving the area next to the yellow flower center white for now. I plan to add a yellow transition there once I finish painting the petals. I'll be adding more details to the remaining petal tips. I believe it might look even better if some petals had softer, more muted details instead of what I initially did. I tend to get so absorbed in the coloring process that it's only when I start editing the video that I realize that there are things I might have missed or could improve. I'm going back in to make fine strokes more prominent, and you can do this too if you think that there's much more detail required at any point, or soften it. It completely depends on you. It's your preference. I'm going to gently apply diluted golden ochre next to the flower center, softly glaze over the flower center as well, and let the color extend towards the petals. This way, I can create a warm, unified look that enhances the flower's beauty without that area looking stark. The transition will also look really nice. Now let's talk about the leaves. It is a bit funny, but I find that the more time I spend on the flowers, the less time I dedicate to the leaves. It's just how I like to work with color. Now here I use a blend of mossy oak, golden ochre, and origin umber for shading my leaves, with the proportions changing depending on each one. I start by lightly wetting the leaves with water and gently blotting off the excess. Then I apply a slightly stronger pigment to areas I want to appear darker. Afterward, I build up color gradually using a mix of green and yellow, dropping in yellow in spots where I want to add a pop of vibrancy. Finally, I add some darker shades for depth. I will also add very diluted raspberry rose pigment to some of the leaves. Now, all leaves are colored differently, and you can go back in to add more detail, but I did not spend a lot of time on the leaves. These were done super fast, and you can tell. Now, to really bring this watercolor panel to life, I'll gently add a light color wash to the background. You can stop right here because there are some areas here that are really tight. So these nooks and crannies are hard to color in for some people. So you can stop here, and your background, you can let it be white. But if you are confident with your coloring, let's start by applying water and then add in green pigment. That's right on my palette. It's a very diluted green pigment, and I believe it's mixed with yellow. You'll want to have 2 brushes ready. One in case you want to soften the color or if you apply too much pigment. Keep your damp brush handy. It shouldn't be dripping with water, just moist enough to activate and lighten the pigment you've laid down, in case you made a mistake, or just to spread out that pigment. Once the color wash is in place on the panel, now you can then decide if you need some texture for extra interest. The color wash is the first part where you have just added a light green color to the background. To add texture for this next part, you will want to practice a bit first. So I recommend trying it out somewhere else before adding it to your final piece. To add some texture or stucco-like watercolor effect, try using the same paint concentration but with a little less water. Gently dab the paint with a size 6 or 4 brush onto the background, and this is just dabbing the paintbrush repeatedly on the background. Now feel free to go over the foliage, but be mindful not to use too much water so the paint doesn't start to run over, and avoid the flowers while you're working. This texture will also be more concentrated on one side than the other. Like for example, in this case, it will be more concentrated on the left and less on the right and the top, as I've kept those spaces softer for balance. Another way to add texture is to include splatters, both diluted and with different concentrations, plus sizes on a still wet panel so that they aren't as prominent. You can always blot them or soften them. This is again your preference. Not a lot of people like this kind of look because it looks messy, but I do love the texture and I wanted to share the technique. A soft color wash works beautifully too, as it helps ground the image and adds a bit of body to the watercolor panel. So you can just stop there. You don't necessarily have to add the stucco-like texture. Now that we are done, I could go back in to add more detail or depth to my leaves, but I'm going to stop here, though there is certainly room to add more. I hope this project inspires you to explore moody palettes and enjoy layering watercolor at your own pace. If you try this technique, be sure to tag Altenew and me. I'd love to see what you create. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.
Wait, we have more where that came from. If you're after fabulous card making tutorials, you are definitely in the right spot. Our amazing design team create and upload fabulous video tutorials right to this YouTube channel. If you don't want to miss another amazing crafting tutorial, don't forget to subscribe and click that fun red button that you can see. Let's become paper crafting experts together.